The deep space station floated in the darkness, its metal surface cold and silent. Inside, a group of alien scholars worked in the research chamber. They had spent years studying the stars, searching for lost knowledge. Tonight, they had found something strange. A signal had appeared, weak but steady, coming from the edge of the galaxy. It was old, far older than any recorded transmission. The lead scholar, Jorvik, adjusted the frequency, his long fingers tapping the controls. The signal's origin was a mystery, but one thing was clear: it came from a dead world. The others gathered around as the sound played through the speakers. It was broken, static-filled, but there were words, a language long forgotten. Jorvik's 3 eyes widened. "Run it through the decoder," he ordered. The machine hummed, trying to make sense of the ancient words. Seconds passed, then minutes. Finally, the screen flickered, and the message translated. "To those who listen, we were here, we were strong. We were the first, but now, we are gone." The scholars exchanged nervous glances. Jorvik's assistant, a young researcher named Velma, whispered, "It's a death message." Jorvik nodded. "Yes, but from who?" Velma's fingers danced over the control panel. The signal's point of origin. It matches records of a world called Earth. The room fell silent. Earth, a name that existed only in legends, a world that had been destroyed 40,000 years ago. The scholars had heard the stories. Humanity was an ancient race, one of the first to rise among the stars. But they were wiped out long ago. No one knew how. Some said war. Others believed they vanished by their own hands. But one fact remained: no human had been seen in thousands of generations. Yet here was their voice, still calling out across the stars. Velma continued reading the translation. The message spoke of a great war, of enemies too strong, of a final stand. It spoke of hope and despair. And then the final lines appeared on the screen. "We leave this message not as a cry for help, but as a warning. If you hear this, know that we are not truly gone. We are waiting." The air in the chamber felt heavy. Waiting? What did that mean? Jorvik turned to Velma. "Play it again." Velma hesitated. There was something wrong about the message. It was too clear. Most transmissions from that long ago would have been lost to time, broken beyond repair. But this one, it was almost perfect, as if it had been preserved on purpose. Still, she obeyed. The message played again, and this time, a small, hidden frequency pulsed beneath the words. A whisper, a sound too faint to notice at first. Velma quickly ran a deeper scan. Her blood turned cold. There's another layer to the message. She adjusted the controls. The static cleared. And then, for the first time in 40,000 years, new words emerged. "We will return." The lights in the station flickered. The scholars looked at each other, fear in their eyes. Had they just awoken something long forgotten? Jorvik stood frozen, his mind racing. Humanity was dead, weren't they? And if they weren't, what was coming next? Velma couldn't take her eyes off the screen. The words, "We will return," kept repeating in her mind. The message had traveled through the void for 40,000 years, but it was more than just a recording. It felt like a promise, or worse, a threat. Jorvik paced the research chamber, his mind struggling to accept what they had just uncovered. The history books were clear. Humanity was extinct. Their worlds had turned to dust. Their fleets had vanished. No trace of them remained. And yet, here was their voice, still alive in the depths of space. The other scholars whispered among themselves, nervous and unsettled. Velma glanced at them, feeling the tension growing in the room. They were scientists, explorers of the unknown, but this was something beyond any discovery they had ever made. Jorvik turned sharply. "We need to report this to the High Council." Velma hesitated. "Do you think they'll believe us?" "They have to," Jorvik said, though he didn't sound convinced. The Council had strict rules about ancient signals. Most were dismissed as ghost transmissions, echoes from civilizations long gone. But this was different. Velma took a deep breath and prepared the transmission. As she worked, she felt something strange, a presence, like unseen eyes watching them. It was an absurd thought. They were alone in the station, floating in the cold emptiness of space, but she couldn't shake the feeling. The report was sent, and all they could do was wait. The silence felt heavier than before. After an hour, a reply came. The message was short. Cease all research immediately. Delete the transmission. Do not speak of this again. Velma's breath caught in her throat. They want us to erase it. Jorvik read the words again, his face darkening. They're afraid. But why? Velma's voice rose. This is the last message of an entire species. We can't just. Jorvik raised a hand to silence her. His mind was racing. The council's reaction was too fast, as if they had been expecting this signal. As if they already knew about it. That's when the station's power flickered. The scholars jumped as warning lights flashed across the control panels. The station's automated defenses activated, scanning for an unseen threat. Velma's heart pounded. What's happening? She asked. Jorvik checked the readings. Something is approaching. Velma turned to the monitors. At first, there was nothing but empty space. Then she saw it. A ship moving toward them. It was old, its metal surface scarred by time. No markings, no insignia. But what frightened Velma the most was its design. She had seen it before, in history records, in ancient data files. It was human. A ship from a race that had been gone for 40,000 years. The scholars stood frozen as the vessel drifted closer. Then, without warning, the station's communication system activated on its own. A voice filled the chamber, calm, steady, and unmistakably human. You have heard our message. Now you will understand. The signal cut out. The scholars stared at each other, fear and confusion written across their faces. Velma's hands trembled. This isn't possible. Jorvik exhaled slowly. It doesn't matter if it's possible. It's happening. The human ship stopped just outside the station. No weapons fired. No threats were made. It just waited. Velma swallowed hard. What do they want? Jorvik turned to his team. Prepare for contact. The scholars hesitated, but they obeyed. They had spent their lives studying the past. Now, for the first time in history, the past had come looking for them. Velma's breathing was unsteady as she stared at the human ship outside their station. It remained motionless, its dark metal hull reflecting the distant light of a dying star. It had no visible markings, no signs of activity, yet it was here, moving under its own power, responding to their discovery. Inside the station, the scholars were in chaos. Some whispered in fear, others argued about what to do. Jorvik remained silent, his mind focused. The High Council had ordered them to erase the signal and forget it ever existed. But now, forgetting was impossible. The station's sensors flickered with new data. Velma's hands flew across the controls, trying to make sense of it. Jorvik, she said, her voice unsteady. The ship, it isn't broadcasting anything. No distress signal. No request for communication. Jorvik frowned. Then how did it speak to us? No one had an answer. Velma hesitated, then made a decision. With shaking fingers, she activated the station's communication system. Unknown vessel. Identify yourself. Silence. She tried again. We are a research station under the jurisdiction of the Galactic Council. Identify yourself. For a long moment, there was nothing. Then, without warning, the ship's dark hull shifted. Panels along its surface opened, revealing what looked like antennae. A signal pulsed from the ship, not in words, but in code. Velma's screen filled with data. She quickly translated it, her breath catching in her throat as the words formed. Humanity was never gone. We were only waiting. The scholars stared at the screen in stunned silence. Velma's hands trembled. This wasn't a ghost ship. It was a message. A declaration. Jorvik exhaled. They planned this. Velma's eyes darted between the monitors. But how? 40,000 years is. The station shook violently. Alarms blared. Emergency lights flickered. The scholars grabbed onto the control panels as the station lurched to one side. Velma's heart pounded. Jorvik gritted his teeth. Report. Velma scanned the readings. Something just activated inside the human ship. The monitors displayed energy surging through the vessel, flowing through circuits and systems that had been dead for millennia. The ship was awakening. The station's sensors suddenly picked up another signal, not from the ship, but from deep space. Velma's screen lit up with thousands of data points. I don't understand, she whispered. The human ship isn't alone. Jorvik's eyes widened. There are more. Velma's hands moved quickly, scanning for answers. Then she saw it. Far beyond the edges of their known maps, hundreds of signals had begun to pulse in unison. Weak at first, then growing stronger. It was like something hidden was waking up, something that had been buried under the fabric of space and time. The scholars stood frozen. They had triggered something far greater than a single lost ship. The station's comms flickered again. A voice, distorted but clear, echoed through the chamber. You are not the first to find us, but you may be the last. Velma's blood turned to ice. Jorvik turned to her. We need to leave. Now. Velma was already ahead of him, activating the station's emergency protocols. But before she could finish, the human ship moved for the first time. It turned toward them. The station's warning systems blared as the ship sent out another transmission, this one not in words, but in raw data, an enormous stream of information flooding their computers. Velma watched in shock as ancient human files, maps, and records appeared on her screen. This wasn't just a message. It was history, the missing pieces of humanity's past. Jorvik scanned the files, his hands tightening into fists. They knew this would happen. Velma's voice was barely a whisper. They left this behind, for us to find. The station trembled again. Outside, the stars seemed darker. The human ship wasn't just a relic, it was a beacon. And something, somewhere in the galaxy, had just answered its call. The station's emergency alarm screamed as the human ship continued transmitting data. It was overwhelming. Thousands of encrypted files flooding their systems, bypassing firewalls as if they were nothing. Velma tried to stop it, but it was too fast, too advanced. Jorvik stared at the screens, his mind racing. What are they sending us? Velma's hands flew across the controls, decrypting fragments of the incoming files. Images and text flickered on the monitors. Schematics of ancient starships, maps of lost colonies, coordinates to places that shouldn't exist. And buried within the data, a single line repeated over and over. The second dawn has begun. Velma felt a chill run through her. The phrase meant nothing to them, but to humans, it had to mean everything. A deep hum vibrated through the station's walls. The human ship was powering up. Jorvik clenched his jaw. It's waking up, and we still don't know why. Velma barely heard him. She had found something in the data, a file older than the others, heavily encrypted, as if it had been locked away for a reason. Her fingers moved quickly, decoding it. Then the screen flickered, and a video appeared. The room fell silent as an image of a human filled the screen. His face was worn, eyes dark with exhaustion. He wore a uniform covered in dust and dried blood. Behind him, the ruins of the city stretched endlessly, a world in its final moments. And then he spoke. If you are seeing this, you were never meant to. This message was not for you. It was for them. Velma's breath caught in her throat. 40,000 years ago, they tried to erase us. They thought they won, but we are patient. We are relentless. And we do not forget. A shiver ran through the scholars. Jorvik's claws tightened against the console. The way the man spoke, it wasn't the voice of a species that had lost. The galaxy will think we are dead, Let them believe it. Let them build their empires, grow their arrogance. Because when the time is right, we will return. We will rise again, not as survivors, but as the architects of what comes next. The screen flickered, and for a moment, the man's tired expression softened. To those who find this, if you are not one of us, then you are standing at the edge of something greater than you understand. A storm is coming, and when it arrives, you will either stand with us or be swept away. The video ended. The station was dead silent. Velna's hands trembled as she turned to Jorvik. This wasn't just a message, it was a warning. Before Jorvik could respond, the human ship moved again. The vessel's dark metal hull shifted, revealing what had been hidden beneath the surface. Weapons. Ancient, terrifying weapons, far beyond anything the scholars had ever seen. Velna gasped. They weren't just leaving behind a message, they left behind a fleet. Jorvik's eyes widened as the station scanners picked up movement, not just from this ship, but from the countless signals they had detected earlier. The other ships were waking up. Velna frantically checked the incoming data. Dozens, hundreds, hidden across the galaxy, buried in forgotten corners of space. Some on dead planets, some drifting in the void. All of them had remained silent for thousands of years, until now. And they were activating all at once. Jorvik grabbed the console, shut it down, cut the connection before. Too late. A final pulse of energy surged from the human ship, sending out a signal across the entire galaxy. It was loud, impossible to ignore. Velna's voice shook. What did they just do? Jorvik's face was grim. They announced their return. Far beyond the station, across the cold void of space, something ancient stirred. Humanity's final message had been sent. And now, the galaxy would have to face what came next. The signal spread like wildfire. Across the vast emptiness of space, through forgotten systems and ancient ruins, it echoed. A pulse that reached deep into the fabric of the galaxy. Velna watched in horror as the station's long-range sensors detected movement. Not just the single human ship, but hundreds. They were no longer dormant. Engines flared to life, systems reactivated, and old weapons, untouched for 40,000 years, began to charge. The fleet was waking up. Jorvik's voice was tight with urgency. We need to leave. Now. Velna's fingers moved quickly over the controls. I'm trying. The human data is still flooding our systems. The monitors flickered again, and a new transmission came through. But this time, it wasn't from the human ship. It was from the Galactic High Council. A cold, emotionless voice filled the chamber. All personnel aboard Research Station Theta 9, you are ordered to disengage immediately. This is now a classified matter. Velna exchanged a worried glance with Jorvik. The Council wasn't just shutting them down. They were taking over. Jorvik clenched his jaw. They knew. Velna's stomach twisted. He was right. The Council hadn't just suspected something about the humans. They had been waiting for this moment. And now that it had arrived, they were acting fast. The station trembled as a new fleet appeared on the scanners. Massive warships, sleek and deadly, belonging to the most powerful factions in the galaxy. The Council wasn't here to study the humans. They were here to destroy them. Velna's voice was barely a whisper. They're scared. Jorvik nodded grimly. And they should be. Outside, the human fleet fully awakened. Silent for millennia. Forgotten by time, yet still intact, still prepared. Their technology was ancient, but Velna could already tell it was far more advanced than anything the Council had. This wasn't just a fleet. It was a trap, one set 40,000 years ago. Velna's screen flashed again. The final line of data had decrypted itself from the human files. Her heart pounded as she read the words. They will come to erase us again. Let them try. The first human ships moved. They didn't attack. They didn't speak. They simply positioned themselves, forming a wall between the Council's forces and the deep space relics that had yet to wake. A single thought filled Velma's mind. They were expecting this. Then, a voice cut through the silence. Deep, powerful, and undeniably human. 40,000 years ago, you took everything from us. Our worlds, our people, our place in the stars. The voice was calm, but it carried the weight of a forgotten empire. You buried us in history. You called us extinct. Velma felt an invisible pressure settle over her. Whoever was speaking, they weren't afraid. But we remember. The Council's warships armed their weapons, locking onto the human fleet. Velma's hands tightened into fists. This was it. The moment history would change again. Jorvik whispered, "If they fire, the war starts." For a moment, time seemed frozen. The galaxy stood on the edge of something unstoppable. Then the human voice spoke one last time. "Now it's our turn." And the war began. The first shot was fired. A blinding lance of energy erupted from one of the Council's warships, tearing through the void, aimed directly at the leading human vessel. The scholars aboard the station barely had time to react before the human ship moved, not with panic, not with hesitation, but with absolute precision. It shifted just enough to let the energy beam pass harmlessly into the abyss. And then it responded. Velma's eyes widened as the ancient vessel counterattacked, not with a simple beam or missile, but with something else, something far beyond modern technology. The human ship pulsed. A shockwave of invisible energy rippled through space, crashing against the Council's fleet. Not a weapon, something deeper. The Council's ships staggered, their systems flickering wildly. Engines sputtered, shields collapsed, targeting arrays scrambled. The most advanced warships in the galaxy were suddenly helpless, struggling to even stay online. Velma's voice trembled. What? What did they just do? Jorvik's claws dug into the console. They shut them down. Velma quickly scanned the human data still flooding their systems. The answer was buried deep in the files. An old technology, lost to time. A weapon? No, a statement. The Council had ruled through power, through dominance. They had always been the strongest force in the galaxy. But now, they were nothing. The human fleet advanced. Velma could hardly breathe as she watched the ancient warships move, not like relics, not like forgotten ghosts, but like predators that had finally found their prey. More Council ships fired in desperation. They missed. The humans never missed. Their counterattacks weren't chaotic. Every shot was calculated, every strike precise. They didn't waste energy obliterating ships outright. They targeted systems, power cores, engines, weapons. They were crippling the fleet, not destroying it. Jorvik exhaled, a deep realization settling over him. They don't just want to win. They want to prove a point. Velma felt the same cold understanding. Humanity wasn't returning as conquerors. They were returning as judges. The battle should have been one-sided in the Council's favor. It wasn't. For every 100 warships the Council sent, the humans lost only one. The station trembled as a new energy surge filled the void. Velma checked the readings and froze. More human ships had arrived. Thousands. The entire galaxy had underestimated them. For 40,000 years, everyone had believed they were extinct. A forgotten race. A tragic chapter in history, but the truth was far more terrifying. Humanity had never been gone. They had been waiting, watching, preparing. Jorvik turned to Velma, his voice barely above a whisper. We're witnessing the return of an empire. The battle was over before it even began. Council ships fled in all directions. The ones that stayed were disabled, not destroyed, left drifting, helpless, at the mercy of the very species they had once erased. Velma's screen flashed with one final transmission. A message sent across the galaxy, reaching every world, every empire, every species. The same voice spoke again, but this time it wasn't a threat. It was simply a statement of fact. We are humanity. We have returned. The galaxy had changed forever. The battle was over, but the war had just begun. Across the void, the Council's fleet lay in ruins, not from destruction, but from defeat. Their warships, once symbols of absolute power, now drifted powerless. Some still flickered with life, their engines barely functioning. Others remained dark, their crews too stunned to even move. The humans had won. But they hadn't exterminated their enemies. They had let them live. Velma sat frozen in her chair, staring at the aftermath. Her mind struggled to process what she had just witnessed. 40,000 years of silence, shattered in a single day. Jorvik exhaled slowly, his hands gripping the console. They could have wiped them out. Velma nodded, but they didn't. Jorvik's gaze darkened. That's what scares me the most. Outside, the human fleet stood unchallenged, a silent wall of dark metal against the endless void. But they weren't advancing. They weren't claiming territory. They were waiting. The station's monitors flickered again. Another message had arrived, but this time, it wasn't just directed at them. It was broadcast to the entire galaxy. To those who remember us, to those who erased us, and to those who have only ever heard our name in whispers, hear this. The voice was calm, measured. It carried no anger, no hatred, only certainty. We have not come to conquer. We have not come to destroy. Velma's breath caught in her throat. We have come to claim what was taken. Across the galaxy, Velma could imagine the reactions. Governments panicking, fleets scrambling to reposition, countless species, some who had never even heard of humanity before, now forced to acknowledge the return of a species they never expected to see again. But the message wasn't over. We do not seek vengeance. We seek balance. Velma's hands trembled. This wasn't the speech of an empire demanding submission. It was something far worse. The galaxy has forgotten the cost of war. You have grown comfortable in your power, believing yourselves invincible. Velma could feel the weight of those words pressing down on her. You believed our extinction was the end of the story, but you were wrong. She could imagine it now, the ripple effect of these words across the stars. Some species would bow in fear, others would rebel in defiance. But no one could ignore it. We do not ask for permission. We do not ask for peace. We will take our place once more. And you will decide what happens next. The message ended. Silence fell over the station, over the battlefield, over the galaxy. Velma turned to Jorvik, her voice barely above a whisper. What do we do? Jorvik didn't answer. He was staring at the human fleet, at the ships that had reawakened after 40,000 years of silence. They had not come as invaders. They had come as survivors, as witnesses, as a species refusing to be erased again. And the galaxy would never be the same.